Kate Chopin's character and just walk out into the ocean and just let the waves take me over. I needed that person to kind of wake me up and let me know like who I am, or ask me a question and pass me the blunt, or make me feel something. So I think that that fairy tale aspect of the movie is there, and I think it's very purposeful, because if it wasn't there, it would just be anger and silence. And that's all. I mean, I had no cards, but I'm not gonna do that. So
I'm gonna pick up on that because I think what resonated with me was the kind of the search for those, like you're saying, the fairy god friend or something. You know, you have these encounters that happen in life. It's probably everybody's life that you meet someone, you know, when you're younger, and you're wondering like, what was that all about? You know, I mean, the boys used to sit in class, and I'm sure they were flirting because they were making signs to each other, head nods and everything, doing all these signs like this, and it's like something's going on here, you know. And that resonates, that feeling of whether we got a chance really to say who we were and really share our stories, or will life go by without our opportunity of ever really exploring that. And it's beautiful that they have that fairy tale that they go and they can explore that. I think, you know, growing up gay, I needed that too. You know, to hear a different kind of story than that it's going to end in death, or, you know, sickness, illness, and pain and suffering. You know, the only thing is, and when I have looked for like people I had crushes on years later, I mean, they either in situations are not the same. You know, they don't look as good as these guys did after all those years. So they say, "Is that you? You were fired in high school? What happened?" You know. But it's the other thing that resonated with me was Marlon Riggs came to mind, and Tongues Untied. Marlon Riggs was a black gay filmmaker, professor at UC Berkeley, and part of the group of Black Gay Men United here in Oakland during the 1980s black gay literary movement that was encouraged by black feminists. And I remember, I think what you were saying about the bodies of black bodies and scenes and love scenes. In some places, Marlon Riggs' film would not be played, Tongues Untied, like I was in Detroit at the time, by PBS, because they say you can show black men shooting and killing each other on the news, but you can't show us making love. You know, what's up with that? And Marlon's film, and I see this like from that time in the 1980s, and so many folks from the Black Gay Men United, men of African descent who were doing film and literature. Some of them are still around. Many of them passed away from HIV/AIDS. We thought that when 2000 came, there was going to be a cure and the whole world would be changed. Didn't happen. But when I see films like this, it reminds me of one of the poets, black gay poets, Marvin White, locally here, who says, you know, that when my brother dropped his sword, I came along and picked it up and carried it on. And I thought this film continues the story of the legacy that we need to expose, the stories that we know so wonderfully, you know, like these, like, yeah, anyway, I'll stop there, but the stories from our communities that we're familiar with.
You're right. I mean, you know, so, I mean, I think of it literally like Barry Jenkins came here, and we lived here for a while when they were making that film, and then went back to his hometown to shoot this film. Has that continuity, right, from the filmmakers that were groundbreaking. I mean, he was groundbreaking. But we all need to be touched, don't we? I mean, at the heart of this movie, to me, is that. And that's why it's a universal message, that everybody needs to be touched. Right? Like that, you know, it's like if you were going to sum the film up in one thing, is that we all need to be touched. And so you have this guy that has this exterior that is a continuity from the gangster, right? The gangster cat that's from Oakland, that actor, right? That took him under his wing, that was like, hey, little man, you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to look out for you. Me and my partner, we're going to look out for you. We're going to make sure you have a safe place to come when you need it, right? Because many times people talk about the story, they also don't talk about her, right? And I think that it's an interesting thing because there are not a lot of female characters in this, right? And so, like, where is the black woman in the story? But that idea of being black, being gay, and not being touched. What does that mean? And me, that's the sort of one of the power. The other piece that really stood out for me, I'm a filmmaker myself, so I'm always looking at films like technically, which is not always a good thing. But it stood out for me was the lack of music. And so there was an idea in the film for me watching it where they actually wanted us to feel a certain sense of ambient. There was this ambience to most of the film. And those violins come in when they're walking there, but the violins are also, to me, particularly, you know, that music when they park the car and they're going into Kevin's apartment, right? To me, it was the breeze. And so they're talking about the breeze, and they're having this conversation about, look, yo, the breeze could even get to the hood. Right? So like this beauty, which is then also being touched, the wind is touching you now, right? So there's this touch that's happening, and the touch is moving through, and it's like, hey, this touch could save you. It won't save you so that you have a great job. Kevin's like, I don't have a great job. I got sneaker money, right? But I got my kid, and I'm out of prison. Right? And like, I'm free. Yeah, I got 18 months, man, but this is the freest I've been in my whole life. I got purpose, right? Like, that's what's so powerful. Like, those things are going on, and there's an aspect of fantasy in it. But the fantasy for me is really uplifting. Like, if you do go and watch this film from the point of view, like, how few of us are touched, and how few of us are touched when violence is not involved. Right? He got touched by the other guy, but he hit him. But how often are we touched when violence isn't there? When love and tenderness is there? You know, and even if he leaves, he goes back to Atlanta, and we can keep telling the story after it happens, he had that moment. And how does that shape him who he is now? I mean, those are the things that, like, when I watch it, like, when I watched the first time, I couldn't stop crying, because I was like, man, this dude got touched.
Yeah.
Can I touch on that real quick? Because I spoke earlier about missed opportunities, and I believe that there has been a lot of missed opportunities for the Black community. I believe that movie pointed out a lot of the indictment that we have on the system. For one, in the very beginning, you know, to have this young man be chased down the street like an animal, and there be no other adults in the community that intervene, and to have this young man go and lock himself in that abandoned apartment is an indictment on our community and on the system that this is allowed, and that this goes on every single day across this country. The other indictment is of the school system and how they were very ill-equipped and, in a big sense, not interested in mitigating the issues that this young man had. And so it was sort of that whole, you know, school to prison pipeline kind of thing. They were being warehoused. They just were in this room, and that was it. And so it really got escalated to the point where this young man had to hit this other young man with a chair to be able to express himself. But I just want to throw out a what-if kind of scenario. And as I talked about the missed opportunity when the young man asked the guy, what's a faggot? That what if we had the infrastructure and the capacity within our Black families where there wasn't as much ignorance when the homosexuality of a family member came up, and it wasn't one of this, you just don't talk about it, and we're going to relegate you to the wilderness. But if there was sort of a drawing in within the Black community that was healthy, that said, you know what, let's talk about it, and if that's the way you are and that's the way you feel and think, that's fine, because you're still family. What if? How different would that have changed the lives of so many African American folks who have struggled with being able to come out within the Black family? I just throw that out there. I don't know. Maybe I'm being, you know, ridiculous and even throwing out that what if. But I mean, it really speaks to the core of the work that needs to be done to really mitigate this ignorance that exists within our Black family and our Black community. Because at the end of the day, you know, there's so many systemic indictments that we can make on the system, but then we're not talking about it. We're not dealing with it. We've allowed it to just be the way it is. And so it's business as usual. And so I just say, whether you're homosexual, whether you, or whatever your classification is, you know, how do we begin to create this conversation that says, you know what, we need to strengthen the base of what a black community is, what it looks like, so that we can mitigate some of our own issues, because we are not at the top of anybody's agenda. I'm sorry.
I just want to go back to the touch, because the one thing I notice about that movie is the flinching. Like, and I think I always notice the flinching because it made me think about the moments in my own life when I flinch. I flinch when someone is like, just even trying to touch me, like, adoringly, or if I have gotten a scar, and I just kind of feel like in some aspects in, America, like the black man has been taught to flinch because, not necessarily because, someone is touching us, but because when someone is touching us, we are touching them too. And America still looks at the black man as being hard, still looks at, like blackness as being something that is violent. So something about, like, there was something about, like, when the moments when he didn't feel the need to flinch, or even when Kevin didn't flinch when he first touched him, or when he didn't, he didn't flinch from the first time his mother, like, started, like, when we first saw his mother, but that was kind of like, his mother was starting to get on drugs then, I think. I feel like she was just starting to get on the stuff, so he was noticing the ways in which she was, like, nicer to him when she was coming down on it. So he learned to flinch from her, even when she was trying to, like, caress him, or even trying to, like, give him love, or show, if she was trying to show him love, or trying to find money on his body, or anything like that. But there's all these moments where Chiron just flinches, like he doesn't know how to accept touch, and I think that is it's big because it also speaks to when in the black household, at least with mine, like I can remember when like I stopped getting touched, and I stopped getting touched because I was starting to show. So there is that aspect of, like, when his mother called him a faggot and stuff like that, because there's the black father has a choice when he starts noticing if his child is homosexual. He has a choice to continue being a father and to teach that boy how to swim, or any of that, or he has a choice to just kind of let that boy grow up on his own. And it does happen. So there is something in that movie about, the black man, just touch, and being gay, and growing up in a house where, that touch maybe you stop getting touched maybe because, someone sees something in you that they are comfortable with.
Just about the touch as well, and when I remember when we could have circles of black gay friends who get together, we noticed there was like a difference between white gay, like if you go to a party or something, and this was like in the 80s, and with white gays we would shake hands, oh, kissing. But the brothers were like, no, shake my hand. It was like, and there was the suspicion that, what is this kissing stuff all about? And this suspicion about the touch and things. And it goes back to, I had a friend of mine who was talking about black masculinity, where he described it as being tough on the outside, but really soft and tender on the inside, And then there's that protection for that. And I think the same is this for kind of masculinity. And I think about we mentioned about the house of Toni Morrison's book in Sula, where she describes, Sula's mother asked her mother if she loves her, and he would say, yeah, I love you. And she says, well, you never touched, you never hugged me, you never held me. And she was like, child, it was a depression. We didn't have no time for all that, But do we express it in different ways, or have we have our touch, our intimacy, or have we been sort of struggling so much with work and this is struggle with racism and other things that we fail to honor each other with a touch. When I was a youth pastor in Detroit, I noticed the young people do the same thing growing up with friends. If they got into a fight, and the more you held somebody back, the more they would start swinging. And it would be like, you just need a hug. That's what's going on here. And you're swinging. You want to fight more and more because you need somebody to grab you. It's like, boy, it's okay. Come on, you don't have to do this. But that's a very important
Well, it's like the black bodies, right? This hyper masculinity. And when you talk about these sort of hierarchical pyramids that are connected to race, right? Culture, gender, you know, with black males, nobody wants to really say it, but they will still show it, right? That like black males are like the most hyper masculine, right? And so what ends up happening is that, it's everything, right? It's our sexuality, it's the size of our penis, right? It goes down that whole road, right? But inside of that, there is this idea that like if you touch, one of the things inside of it is that if you are a black man who's touching another black man, you're gay, right? And so, my father had a stroke. My father and I were like really tight, but he was this strict dude. He was hardcore Muslim man. He was a black nationalist. And later on in his life, he opened a nightclub called the Upper Room that a lot of people know in the Bay Area. And, when my father was on his deathbed, essentially, all of these people who had come through the Upper Room and gotten to know him in ways I didn't, right, were coming in and giving my dad hugs, spending time with him, kissing him on his head, all those things. And I had to force myself to do it because my dad had set this very strict thing where, like, we don't touch. And then he told me, hey, your grandfather touched me less than I touched you. And so one of his OG friends was coming by. We were right on Pill Hill, and I'm sitting there with my son, who's about 2.5 years old, and I'm holding my son, while my dad is passing, essentially. And this OG guy came, who's one of my dad's friends, and he sees me with my son, and he says, "Oh, you're touching your son. That's good. You're letting him know you love him. I see a lot of y'all touching y'all kids now. That's a good thing. We didn't do that when I was your age, right?" And so there's this whole thing around, like, what does that mean in terms of, touch for us, and how does that affect the children, and how are these young boys growing up, and then how do we counteract all the myths? Because the studies that they're doing now show that black men are spending more time with their children than any other men across the board, and yet the fallacy is that we don't spend any time with our children, that we aren't with our children. And so, there's a ton of pain in that. And unfortunately, one of those fears, or probably one of the biggest ones in the black community, I tell you, I went to a private high school. When I got there, I was one of the only black kids there. And the games that the mostly white boys would play that were affluent were all about, like, body parts. And I was super uncomfortable. I wasn't super uncomfortable about my sexuality, but I was super uncomfortable. I was like, man, my black friends don't ever play these games. The ones I've been around, because there's this idea that if you're playing that game, it means you're a gay man, right? And so that's what got so intense. And the friends in my neighborhood that came out to me that were gay, it was like, as they started, like you were saying, like, if they were effeminate, right, then they started to pull away from the other boys. Because they're like, if I keep acting effeminate, how are they going to perceive me? How am I going to get treated? And so those are the folks that pulled away, and they started going to art school or going to other places where they could be accepted and kind of be away from the community, so the violence wasn't there. So the touch they got wasn't a violent touch.
Just real quickly on that point about, I forgot what I was going to say.
I feel like we could just keep going all day. But we do want to open it up to the audience.